Okay, part two of the MOU mini series. Shout out to Denver Center on this one for continuing the streak of keeping Seattle Center off the Archie podium for the second year in a row. Way to go, guys. Yeah, so history lesson, we'll continue with that. Some white book examples again. We're going to go into Article 38 today. One of the things I found there was if you're bypassed for overtime, the remedy is you're offered the next opportunity. So of course now we have a nationally agreed upon remedy for if that happens and you get paid for 25%, paid straight time for 25% of whatever the overtime hours would have been. And then in this article we see sometimes it's not all about what the white book says, but what it didn't say compared to what the slate book says now. So in the white book, there was no guarantee for holdover overtime like we have for minimum of 1 hour if you're held over. So they could essentially just hold you over for 5 minutes till somebody came back from break and then send you home, whatever. There's also no guarantee for the 8 hours if you were scheduled or called in on your RDO. So a couple things, well, three things that are much better in the slate book than we have now. And again, another example of how well the agency will treat you if left to their own devices. So last video, I said that we would talk about if you scheduled overtime in conjunction with annual leave, some ways to remedy that. So the example I always use is you bid 2 weeks of annual leave and they schedule you for overtime on the RDOs in the middle of those 2 weeks. You're scheduled for family vacation, overseas, out of the country, out of the state, wherever it may be. The agency, I don't think, expects you to fly home and work a shift of overtime and then fly back to finish your vacation. In that case, you could go to the agency, your supervisor, the scheduler, and say, hey, I got scheduled overtime on this day. Here's my plane tickets, my hotel reservation showing that I'm going to be out of town for this time period. And the language in Article 38, Section 4 says, employees shall be relieved of an overtime assignment when in the judgment of the agency, personal circumstances make it impossible for the employee to perform the duty. So that would be an example. I would always talk to your fact rep about it just to make sure that at your facility they're applying it properly and fairly across the bargaining unit. Or if you get some pushback from the agency, again, talk to your fact rep and see. One thing that I will say is you will be relieved of the assignment. It does not mean that you will be relieved of ever being assigned overtime because you have some situation on Fridays. So that's something you'll have to work out. I will quickly touch on, in that same section, it talks about being relieved of the overtime if the health or efficiency of the employee may be impaired. So obviously you can still call in sick for overtime shifts if you're under the weather or whatever the case may be that sick leave applies to. It doesn't count towards your sick leave balance, obviously, because it's overtime, but it does count towards sick leave call-ins. So if if your facility is working 6-day work weeks and you call in on your overtime shift every Friday, the agency is going to catch on to that, and they can still use the sick leave counseling avenue to address that, even though you're calling in sick on overtime and it's not counted towards your balance. It does still count towards sick leave call-ins, or if you're on a sick leave restriction letter, you'll still need to show proof of the doctor's visit or whatever it may be. So that pretty much covers Article 38, and we'll dive into some other articles next time.